Okay, here we are at the WWII Millworks in Historic Park. Let's go check it out. This is really the story of one man's obsession, Eric Hollenbeck, who took an interest in Victorian architectural woodworking and really out of necessity and I suppose desperation collected up a lot of old machinery in order to create this millwork shop. As time went on, he expanded that activity into running a school for at-risk youth and creating sort of a ad hoc village site for tourists to enjoy. Now, the Blue Ox claims to have America's largest collection of vintage human-powered woodworking equipment. There's certainly quite a few pieces there, but they also have a lot of vintage electric equipment as well. A lot of stuff there was also belt-driven, which at one time probably would have been running off a steam engine. There's the ox himself, running a massive forklift. Look at that beast, eh? All that timber you see them loading is actually cribbing to go retrieve a boat that was discovered at the bottom of Lake Shasta as it dried up last summer. It's referred to as a Higgins boat, which is a type of landing craft designed by Andrew Jackson Higgins. It's going to come back here to the Millworks for restoration and then move on to its final resting place, which I believe is the birthplace of Higgins, which is Columbus, Nebraska. Okay, right now it looks like they're running a forklift just for the sake of running a forklift, because those things don't look heavy enough to warrant forklifting. So there's a lot of stuff here that appears to possibly have been working at some point. There's the shingle mill. I'm fairly impressed at the amount of effort that went into setting up this equipment to get it functional again. A little disappointing to see that it's fallen into disrepair since then. I suppose it's a case of if it's not working, it probably wasn't making any money. So for shingles, not shakes. Shakes being split, shingles being sawn. This little saw appears to be optimized for mitering shakes, probably for doing the corners of buildings. So up here we got some molding equipment, which is pretty cool. You can see these racks are all covered in trays of molding head cutters. There's the molding machine there. What a beast. Holy crepes. And then we got fence pickets over here, and this little tool is the makes the pickets. So you would drop your stake in there, and then you can see the knife here. It just goes and it carves off. See all the little pieces there. Carve off the ends of these one at a time. There's a hand-powered one inside the main building, I noticed. This one, it looks like this is primarily, there's a thicknessing head there, and then we got our posts there and there, so it'll thickness and do edge profiles all at the same time, so you can set up the whole thing to stuff in rough wood in one side and punch out something finished on the other side. I was told one of the things they're producing at this molding machine are redwood gutters, so there's a few profiles that they had on display. I still see a few wooden gutters here in British Columbia as well. Big bastard knife grinder over here. Look at that. Whew. It's got a bunch of other grinder setups. This is all running on a power takeoff or belt drive, although he's just got an electric motor running these guys instead of steam power. Just finally found the boat collection. This thing is super interesting. I mean, it's a disaster, but kind of very cool. It looks familiar. I don't know exactly what the design is. We've got a few prams all stacked up here. Also fairly typical, and actually, of course, the stuff I'm always interested in is the stuff that's usually the most buried. Is this little flat bottom skiff here. Love to know what's going on, what that's all about, but anyhow. This, I feel like this might be a dynamite pacing boat, which means by default it's a Phil Bolger design. I'll have to look through the books. If we look here in Dynamite Payson's Instant Boats, it looks like the Bolger designed car topper skiff looks real darn close to this boat in question. And then an interesting find is this up here, which is this Carvel built. It's a duck punt basically. They call it a scull boat, but it's a really odd configuration, and you can see there's this hole through the transom, which I can only assume they tried to set it up with a motor at some point, like with a long shaft. I don't know though, but it's got the oddest proportions I've ever seen. Then notice how this little flat bottom skiff we looked at before has got the same hole through the transom. Just found an interesting little canoe. I'm gonna guess that's an Old Town Otka. I'm basing that guess on that really radical sweep of the sheer at the bow and stern. See what it is. That is definitely, those are Old Town decks. Some of the Old Town canoes sport these very distinctive deck shapes. It's too dark. Too dark. While watching some of the YouTube videos about the Blue Ox, I noticed these boats in this footage. That little flat bottom skiff in the front appears to be the one that we saw earlier, and in behind is a really interesting looking scow, and I really wish that was still on the property. I would have loved to have checked that out. Yep, pretty much like every other blacksmith shop I've seen. Complete freaking disaster. All kinds of old blacksmithing forges lying around, but it's my time to go, so I'll just wander out here. Your mother sent you to get me?
No, I don't know where she is.
Oh, really? Look at that beast, eh? Alright, there's a little taste of the Blue Ox Millworks and Historic Village in Eureka, California. Go check it out, it's a fun little stop. Now if you like that video and like to see more of that sort of stuff, please leave me a comment below. Some of that footage I snatched off other YouTube videos. I've linked to those down in the description. Now remember, these videos are supported by my followers on Patreon, and this week I want to thank Jonathan Tobias and Michael Reed for joining up. If you can help me out on Patreon, I really appreciate that. There's links in the corner or down in the description. Now let's just go out with some chickens.